React enthusiasts. Welcome back to our Day 5 React tutorial series. In today's session, we will deep dive into understanding React state and lifecycle methods using a fascinating clock example. If you are new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our React content. Let's get started. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty of React's lifecycle method, let's talk about state. Imagine creating a digital clock component. The time displayed is dynamic and changes over time. This is where React state comes into play. We will store the current time as the state of our clock component. Setting our state is simple, whether you are using class-based or functional component. In class-based component, here's how our clock component might look. Now let's see an example. Now I am going to create a clock component using class component of React. So let me name it clock class component. So I will import React and component from React library. Now I will create a class called clock class and extend the component. Now I'll create a constructor which has props. I will call the super method and put props here. Now I will create the state of this component by using this dot state is equal to current time new date. So this is how we can initialize the state in a class type of component. Now similarly, we can create a function component for our clock. Let's name it clock function component. .js. Okay, let's create a function, clock function. Give up and then define the body. So here, in order to create the state, we define a const which will be a current time and a setter for it, that is set current time. And this can be created using use state hook from React library. So in our later videos, we will talk about hooks in details. This is how a state is created for a functional component. Now let's tie in the component lifecycle methods. Okay. As the clock component is created, updated, and possibly removed, these methods come into play. Now let's see what are those methods. The first phase in any component lifecycle is mounting phase. During the mounting phase, our clock component is being created and inserted into the DOM. In class-based component, We can use component did mount method to start a timer that updates every second. And in functional component, we achieve the same effect with the use effect. So let's see how we can implement it. So we will go back to our class component and create here a method called component did mount. Now let's create the body of this method. Here we will create a timer ID which will have a return from set interval JavaScript method, native method, where we will keep on updating the current time. So how we can update it, the current time? So there is a method given called this dot set state, via which we can update the state current time. So here we will call this dot set state, and inside the argument we will pass our JSON object where we will give current time the new value, that is new dot date. And this update we have to call in every second. So we will call it every second by passing 1000 millisecond in the set interval method. The same effect can be achieved in functional component with the use of use effect. So here we will define use effect. We will call. So use effect basically takes a callback function as its first argument. Here again we will define a timer ID. So I will copy this whole code. Here we cannot use this, but instead we can use a const. And instead of this dot set effect, set state, we will use the setter function defined earlier. So in the set interval method, we are calling set current time, and the current time will be our new date. And this will be called after every 1 second. Here we have to also clear the interval. So how we can do? So in here we have to return a function which will clear the interval set above. That is timer ID. Okay, and this has to be done only if the affected values are changed inside this array. But here we don't, this whole function is not dependent on any value, so we'll pass an empty array. So we will talk more on use effect in our upcoming videos. Now the second phase in the lifecycle method is called updating phase. During the updating phase, if the component state changes, it triggers a re-render. In class-based component, the component date update method can be utilized for a specific action after each update. Similarly, the use effect hook in the functional component can be utilized. Now let's see them with the example. Now let me create a component date update method in class-based component and check if the previous state dot current time is not equal to this dot state dot current time. So from where we'll get this previous state argument? We'll get from this component date update. And then do a console.log that clock updated. Similarly, in the functional component, we will write use effect hook where we will do a console.log clock that a clock is updated. Now here we don't have state variable available. So how we'll check? We will pass in the array which is passed as a second argument of use effect the variable to watch on, like the current time. So whenever this current time is changed, this console will be logged. Now the last phase of a component is unmounting phase. Finally, during the unmounting phase, when the component is being removed, we should clean up our timer using component will unmount method in class-based component and use effect in a functional component. In a functional component, we have already done using the first use effect where we have returned the clear interval and the timer ID. So it will clear this timer. In clock-based component, we can achieve the same using component will unmount method. Here we will call the clear interval and will clear the this dot timer ID, which we have defined in component date mount method. Sorry guys, I used here clear immediate method. It should be clear interval in the class component. So by mistake, I have used clear immediate. Now let's see how this component will work in our application. But we have not written anything out of these components. So let's return a JSX out of these components. So open the class component and return a div which will show the timer. So we will use the render method and return the JSX here. So we will use this dot state dot timer ID, but this is a type of date object. So we will use not timer ID dot current time, but this is a kind of date object. So we have to convert it into string. So we will use the time string method of the date object. Similarly, we will return the same thing in our functional component, but here we don't have this dot state. So we will simply use the current time, which is defined above. Now let's import it in our app.js. So clock class, and now clock function. Let's put it into top. Now let's see the example. So here you can see the clocks are running. The date string is updated for every second. Now let's see also the console log. So here also we can see the console messages which are coming from our component. Thank you for joining us in today's tutorial. We hope you have gained a deeper understanding of React state and lifecycle methods through our clock example. Remember, whether you are building a class-based or functional component, mastering these components and concept is essential for crafting dynamic and responsive application. Before we wrap up, a quick heads up. In our next video, we will be delving into the world of React class component lifecycle methods in detail. We will explore how each phase works and how you can utilize these methods effectively in your projects. So stay tuned for an in-depth journey through React's class lifecycle component methods. If you found this presentation valuable, don't hesitate to give us a thumbs up and share it with fellow developers. If you have any questions or thoughts, please drop them in comments below. Keep coding, keep exploring, and we will catch you in the next video.